am Elena, 34 years old. And exactly 8 years ago, my fiancé abandoned me for my best friend the night before our wedding, leaving me stranded with a $50,000 floral and venue debt and a completely shattered reality. I spent the next decade in absolute silence, rebuilding my universe from the ashes. Tonight, at our 10-year university alumni gala, he cornered me against an ice sculpture, looked me up and down with profound disgust, and laughed in my face. He told me that leaving me for her was the greatest upgrade of his life because I was clearly destined to remain a nobody. I simply took a slow sip of my sparkling water and offered a polite smile. 5 minutes later, the heavy brass doors of the ballroom swung wide open, and a billionaire equity founder that everyone in the financial world feared walked in carrying a 5-year-old boy. My former best friend dropped her champagne flute as the billionaire walked straight up to me, kissed my cheek, and the little boy yelled out, "Mommy." Before I delve into the details of this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground against people who entirely underestimated your worth and want to see karma delivered with surgical precision. The heavy bass of the jazz band vibrated through the soles of my custom leather stilettos. It had been a decade since I last stepped foot in this downtown hotel for anything other than a high-stakes corporate buyout. Yet the scent of cheap cologne and desperate networking hung in the air, exactly as I remembered. I stood near the perimeter of the dimly lit ballroom, a glass of sparkling water held loosely in my hand. Watching the alumni gala unfold like a tragically predictable movie, I am currently the Vice President of Global Tech Acquisitions for the most aggressive investment syndicate on the East Coast. But absolutely nobody in this room knew that. I had deliberately kept my digital footprint non-existent, ensuring that my professional empire remained entirely separated from the ghosts of my 20s. Right now, I was cornered between a decorative pillar and the man who had nearly destroyed my existence. Julian leaned in, physically blocking my path to the exit. A 35. He still wore the same smug, self-satisfied smirk that had once fooled me into accepting his proposal. Tonight, however, that smirk was paired with a lease designer suit that strained at the buttons and a flashy watch that tried entirely too hard to project wealth. The scent of his scotch-laced breath hit me as he took a step forward, invading my personal space with the entitlement of a man who believed the world revolved around his ego. I have to admit, Elena, I am genuinely shocked you showed your face tonight. Julian sneered, his eyes raking over my deliberately understated charcoal dress. I had chosen the garment precisely because it screamed middle management to the untrained eye, completely masking the fact that it was woven from vicuna wool and cost more than his annual bonus. I figured you would still be hiding in some tiny studio apartment crying over old bridal magazines. But look at you, still plain, still quiet, still going nowhere. I did not flinch. I did not break eye contact. I just let the heavy silence stretch. A psychological tactic I use daily to make nervous software founders sweat across glass boardroom tables. But Julian, completely devoid of self-awareness, filled the void himself. You know, he continued, leaning his forearm against the pillar right next to my head, effectively trapping me. Seeing you now, looking so entirely ordinary, it just validates everything. Leaving you the night before our wedding was the absolute best decision I ever made. Chloe is twice the woman you could ever hope to be. She has drive, she has elite style, she is a winner. And you are exactly where I left you. He laughed a short theory, abrasive sound that carried over the ambient noise of the ballroom. A few people nearby turned their heads, their eyes wide with the morbid curiosity of bystanders witnessing a public humiliation. I recognized some of them from my past. They were waiting for me to shatter. They were waiting for the broken 26-year-old girl who had been left at the altar with a massive debt to resurface and run away in tears. I took a slow, measured sip of my water. "Are you quite finished, Julian?" My voice was perfectly modulated, pitched low enough that he had to strain to hear it over the music, yet cold enough to make him blink in momentary confusion. "Just telling it exactly like it is, Elena." Escoffed, recovering his arrogance quickly. "No hard feelings, right? It is just business. Upgrades have to be made." "Upgrades." I repeated the word, tasting the bitter irony. But I kept my expression entirely neutral. "I suppose we all make choices regarding our long-term investments." Before he could process the peculiar phrasing of my response, a sudden, heavy silence swept through the entrance of the ballroom. The heavy brass double doors swung open, held back by two event staff who suddenly looked terrified. The ambient chatter in the room did not just fade. It evaporated completely. Julian frowned, turning his head to follow the collective gaze of the room. Through the doors walked Victor Sterling. Atrezet. Victor was a fixture on global financial broadcasts. The billionaire founder whose equity syndicate had been aggressively dismantling and restructuring tech companies across the globe. He was wearing a bespoke midnight blue suit. But what caused the collective gasp in the room was not his towering presence or his notorious corporate reputation. It was the 5-year-old boy sitting comfortably on his hip. Max, my son, was wearing a miniature blazer that matched his father perfectly. His little arms wrapped securely around Victor's neck. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one in this room of mid-level managers and struggling startup founders expected a titan of industry to crash their alumni event. I watched the color rapidly drain from Julian's face, his jaw dropping slack. As the regional vice president of a failing software distribution firm currently begging for a buyout to avoid mass liquidation, Julian knew exactly who Victor Sterling was. His entire career, his heavily mortgaged lifestyle, and his desperately inflated ego currently rested squarely in the palm of Victor's hand. Victor's sharp, dark eyes scanned the room, bypassing the gaping faces of my former classmates until they locked directly onto me. The hard, predatory edge he wore for the media instantly melted. A genuine, warm smile broke across his face. He walked with absolute purpose, ignoring the frantic whispers erupting around him, cutting a straight path toward the corner where Julian was currently rooted to the floor in total paralysis. Julian scrambled backwards, stumbling over his own polished shoes to get out of Victor's way. His previous arrogance vanishing into sheer, unadulterated terror. Victor stopped right in front of me. He leaned down, placing a soft, lingering kiss on my cheek, his free hand resting securely on the small of my back. "I am sorry to interrupt your evening, sweetheart," Victor said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly in the dead quiet of the room. But Max absolutely insisted he needed his mother to tuck him in tonight. And frankly, I did not have the heart to tell him no. Max beamed, reaching his little arms out for me. "Mommy, you said you would read the space book." "I did say that, did I not, my love?" I murmured, running my hand through Max's dark hair before looking up at my husband. "You are right on time, Victor." From across the room, the sharp, unmistakable sound of shattering crystal pierced the silence. I shifted my gaze past Victor's shoulder. Clue, draped in a flashy metallic dress that I knew for a fact her failing art galleries could not afford, stood frozen near the catering table. The stem of her champagne flute was still clutched in her hand, while the bowl lay in glittering shards at her feet. a pool of expensive liquor seeping into the carpet. She was staring at me, her eyes wide with a horrific, crushing realization. I looked back at Julian. He was hyperventilating, his eyes darting frantically between Victor Sterling, the child calling me mommy, and me. The man who had just bragged about his massive upgrade was currently suffocating under the weight of his own profound insignificance. I smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp expression. The night had only just begun. The shock vibrating through the ballroom was a tangible, electric current. But as I stood there, enveloped in the protective presence of my husband and son, my mind violently snapped back to the exact moment this brutal war had begun. The contrast between the absolute power I held in this room tonight and the crushing vulnerability I experienced 8 years ago was staggering. I needed to remember the absolute agony of that night. I needed to let the ghost of the 26-year-old Elena surface for just a fraction of a second so that the execution of my current plan would be carried out with the merciless precision it demanded. 8 years ago, I was sitting in the private tasting room of a high-end bakery downtown. The sweet smell of buttercream and spun sugar hung thick in the air. It was the evening before my wedding day. The shop was closed to the public, the owner having stayed late just so I could finalize the cake delivery schedule. I was exhausted, stressed about seating charts, and incredibly anxious about the impending event. But beneath it all, I was profoundly happy. Or at least I thought I was. I had been planning this day for over a year. Every detail had been meticulously arranged. Every vendor paid. Every RSVP logged in a massive database. I believed I was standing on the precipice of a beautiful future. My phone had buzzed in my purse, which was sitting on the tasting table a few feet away. I asked the baker to pause so I could check it, assuming it was Julian confirming the timeline for the rehearsal dinner. He was supposed to be picking up his tailored tuxedo. I pulled the phone from my bag. It was a text from Julian. It was not about the rehearsal dinner. It was exactly 3 lines long. "I cannot do this, Elena. I am leaving with Chloe. Do not try to find us." I stared at the glowing screen until the letters blurred into meaningless, jagged shapes. My brain refused to process the syntax. Leaving with Chloe. Chloe. My best friend since our freshman year of university. Chloe, who had held my hair back when I was sick, who knew all my deepest insecurities, who was supposed to be standing right next to me tomorrow in a sapphire bridesmaid gown. We had spent countless hours sitting on the floor of my apartment, drinking cheap wine and plotting our futures. She had helped me pick out my wedding venue, dabbing away fake tears and telling me how perfect the day would be. Every smile, every word of encouragement, every shared secret had been a calculated, malicious performance while she was sleeping with the man I loved. The air in the bakery vanished. I could not breathe. I tried to dial Julian's number, my finger slipping clumsily over the glass screen. It went straight to voicemail. I called Chloe. Straight to voicemail. A cold dread began to seep into my bones, replacing the initial shock with a sickening realization. Chloe had been overly involved in the financial logistics of the wedding. She had insisted on handling all the joint funds for the floral arrangements and the venue deposits, collecting the cash to alleviate my stress. During the final weeks of planning, I had blindly trusted her, handing over envelopes of cash collected from my savings. I opened my banking app on my phone, my hands shaking violently. The shared account I had set up specifically for the wedding expenses, which Chloe had full access to, showed a balance of exactly 0. She had drained it, every single cent. They had not just run away together. They had financed their cowardly escape using the money I had painstakingly saved. The betrayal layered over the heartbreak was entirely suffocating. She was not just a woman who stole my fiancé. She was a calculated thief who had used my trust to fund her betrayal. The baker, noticing my sudden pallor and the way my hands were trembling, rushed over, her face lined with deep concern. She reached out to steady me. I could not speak. The words were trapped in my throat, blocked by a rising tide of panic and total humiliation. I just shook my head frantically, grabbing my coat and running out of the bakery without offering a single word of explanation. I practically threw myself into my car and drove straight to our shared apartment, breaking several traffic laws in my desperation to prove the text message wrong. I needed to see his clothes in the closet. I needed to see his briefcase by the door. I needed this to be a cruel, elaborate joke. But when I unlocked the front door, the apartment was eerily silent. The living room was perfectly neat, untouched. I rushed down the hallway to the bedroom. Julian's closet was entirely empty. The expensive leather travel bags my parents had bought him were missing. Half the bathroom toiletries were gone. His collection of shoes all vanished. I collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, the reality of the betrayal slamming into me like a physical blow. They were gone. My best friend and the man I was supposed to marry had abandoned me, leaving me alone in an empty apartment on the eve of my wedding. I was perfectly and entirely alone, but the emotional devastation was only the first wave. The second wave, the one that would threaten to drown me completely, arrived an hour later when I finally forced myself to move from the edge of that empty bed. I walked into the kitchen, my legs feeling like they were made of solid lead, and opened my laptop. I logged into our joint banking portal, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I clicked on the savings account, the one where we had carefully deposited a significant portion of our paychecks for the last 2 years. The screen loaded and the number staring back at me was an absolute zero. A sharp metallic taste flooded the back of my throat. I refreshed the page, desperately convincing myself it was a technical glitch. The screen reloaded. The balance remained zero. Julian had transferred every single dollar out of our shared savings account earlier that afternoon. My breathing turned shallow and rapid. I frantically clicked over to the credit card account we had opened specifically for the wedding expenses. I had agreed to put the card entirely in my name because Julian had claimed his credit score was taking a hit from a fraudulent charge he was fixing. I had trusted him blindly. The dashboard loaded, displaying a glaring red warning banner across the top. The card was maxed out. The outstanding balance was exactly $50. Ling, ling, ling. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. I clicked on the recent transactions. The charges were staggering and horrifyingly clear. First-class plane tickets to the Maldives, a massive charge at a luxury oceanfront resort, thousands of dollars at a high-end designer boutique. Julian and Chloe had not just stolen the wedding funds to run away. They had financed an extravagant tropical vacation using a credit card tied exclusively to my social security number. They had stolen my money to celebrate their betrayal, leaving the entire debt squarely on my shoulders. I was 26 years old. I was a junior analyst, making a modest salary that barely covered my half of our rent and my own student loans. I did not have $50. Ling, ling, ling. I did not have a wealthy family to bail me out. My parents had passed away during my freshman year of college, leaving me with nothing but a necessity to fend for myself. I was entirely self-made. Julian knew this. Chloe knew this. They both knew exactly how vulnerable my financial situation was, and they had chosen to exploit it with ruthless precision. Suddenly, my cell phone rang, shattering the suffocating silence of the apartment. I jumped, my eyes darting to the screen. It was not Julian. It was a local number I recognized immediately. It was the venue manager for our wedding. I answered with a trembling hand, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hello," I whispered, my voice sounding incredibly small. "Hi, Elena," the manager said, her tone bright and cheerful. A stark contrast to the absolute nightmare I was living. "I am reviewing the final checklist. We still have not received the final cashier check for the venue and the floral installations. Julian mentioned he would drop it off this afternoon. But we have not seen him. We need that payment cleared before the staff begins setting up tomorrow morning." The room started to spin. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on me, pressing the air out of my lungs. The money was gone. The wedding was gone. The man I loved was gone. There is not going to be a wedding. I choked out, the words tearing at my throat. The cheerful demeanor on the other end of the line vanished instantly. "Excuse me, Elena. Did you say the wedding is canceled?" "Yes," I said, a tear finally escaping and tracing a hot path down my cheek. "The wedding is canceled. I do not have the money. He took the money. He left. Please just cancel everything." I hung up the phone before she could respond. Before I had to hear the pity in her voice, I let the phone drop from my hand. Watching it clatter onto the kitchen tiles, I sank to my knees, surrounded by the physical evidence of a future that had just been violently erased. The financial ruin loomed over me like a tidal wave. 50美元. 0 inches high, interest credit card debt. A broken lease on an apartment I could no longer afford. The impending calls from angry vendors demanding their payments. At 26, my credit score was about to be obliterated. My savings were non-existent. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal was paralyzing. Julian and Chloe had not just broken my heart. They had actively, maliciously conspired to destroy my financial future. They had turned my trust into a weapon and used it to execute a perfect, devastating strike against my independence. I curled into a ball on the floor, gasping for air as a full-blown panic attack seized my body. I was drowning in debt, suffocating in betrayal, and completely, utterly alone in the wreckage of my own life, wondering how I could possibly survive the morning. For several agonizing minutes, I let the panic completely consume me. But as the digital clock on the stove glared back at me, a tiny resilient spark ignited deep within my chest. I could not afford to fall apart. I had no safety net. I had only myself. My first instinct was to call my older sister, Clara. But Clara had just moved across the country for a new job. She was overwhelmed and in no position to handle the chaotic implosion of my life. I needed someone who could look at this disaster objectively. I needed someone who understood crisis management, high-stakes pressure, and ruthless strategy. I needed Marcus. Marcus was Clara's husband, a brilliant corporate litigator who had propelled himself to a senior partnership at one of the most aggressive law firms in the state. He was a force of nature in the courtroom, known for dismantling opponents with clinical precision. Beneath his sharp suits, he was fiercely protective of his family. My fingers trembled as I picked up my discarded phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Elena," Marcus said, his deep voice thick with sleep but immediately alert. "Tell me you are not stressing about the floral arrangements again." "Marcus," I croaked, the sound of my own voice shattering the last remaining dam, holding back my tears. A violent sob ripped through my chest. "He is gone. He took everything." "Marcus, I have a $50, 000 debt in my name, and the accounts are entirely empty." He left with Chloe. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute and terrifying. The jovial brother-in-law vanished instantly, replaced by the surgical, cold-blooded attorney. "I am leaving the house right now," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, radiating absolute authority. "Listen to me very carefully, Elena. Do not answer any calls from vendors. Do not text Julian. Do not text Chloe. Do not log into any more accounts. I will be at your apartment in exactly 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes felt like an eternity suspended in a vacuum. By the time Marcus's heavy, authoritative knock sounded at the front door, the hysterical weeping had burned itself out. I opened the door. Marcus swept into the apartment, wearing gym clothes, but carrying his heavy leather briefcase like a shield. He took one look at my tear-stained face, pulled me into a brief, crushing hug, and then immediately shifted into battle mode. "Sit down," he commanded, opening his laptop and placing it on the kitchen island. "Give me your phone. Give me every single login for every account that has your name attached to it." For the next 4 hours, Marcus turned my kitchen into a war room. He was a machine, moving with a calculated speed that left me in awe. He immediately contacted the credit card company's fraud department. Because Julian and Chloe were not authorized users on the specific card they used for their tropical vacation, Marcus aggressively argued that the charges were fraudulent. He threatened immediate legal action against the bank if they did not freeze the account and launch a formal investigation into the unauthorized overseas transactions. Next, he systematically locked down my social security number, placed hard freezes on my credit reports across all major bureaus, and revoked Julian's access to the apartment portal. When the venue manager tried calling back, Marcus answered my phone. He deployed a stream of legalese so intimidating and complex that the manager immediately backed down, agreeing to halt all setup and direct any future correspondence exclusively to his law firm. He isolated the damage. He built a legal firewall around my remaining assets, ensuring that Julian could not extract another single dime from my name. By the time the sun began to rise, the immediate bleeding had been stopped. The $50,000 debt was now locked in a fierce legal dispute, buying me crucial time. Marcus closed his laptop and looked at me, his dark eyes filled with intense pride. "You survived the night, Elena. Now we plan for the rest of your life." I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. I looked like a victim. I turned on the cold water and splashed it over my face, washing away the remnants of my ruined wedding day. I grabbed a towel and dried my skin. Watching my reflection change, the fear was gone. The sorrow had evaporated. In their place was a hard, impenetrable core of pure survival instinct. Julian and Chloe thought they had destroyed me. They had underestimated me completely. I made a silent, unbreakable vow. I would not cry another tear over a man who was nothing more than a parasite. I was going to climb the corporate ladder with a ruthlessness that would terrify them. I was going to become so immensely, untouchably successful that my very existence would become their greatest punishment. The transition from a devastated bride to a corporate machine started that very Monday. I walked into my junior analyst job wearing a sharply tailored suit I had bought from a consignment shop, and a demeanor so cold it made my supervisor hesitate before speaking to me. The pitying looks from coworkers bounced off my newfound armor. I did not entertain their hushed questions. I simply sat at my desk, opened my spreadsheets, and began the relentless, exhausting process of working myself to the bone. My entry into the venture capital sector was entirely strategic. It was the most cutthroat, high-stakes division in the financial world. It was a vicious arena where weakness was instantly punished. That was exactly where I needed to be. I volunteered for every complex valuation model, every grueling due diligence process, and every weekend assignment. 80-hour work weeks became my baseline. My life was reduced to a brutal, repetitive cycle. I survived on black coffee and a simmering, unquenchable rage that burned deep in my chest. While my peers were out networking, I was buried in financial statements, analyzing corporate vulnerabilities, and learning how to dismantle companies from the inside out. The debt was a constant suffocating weight. Marcus had fought brilliantly, managing to force the credit card company to freeze the $50,000 fraud, and eventually launching a civil suit against Julian. But the legal process was agonizingly slow, and I still had to survive the immediate fallout. I moved into a tiny, windowless studio apartment on the outskirts of the city. I sold everything of value I owned. Every single dollar I earned went toward financial survival. I tracked my expenses with the same ruthless precision I applied to corporate acquisitions. Paying off those initial debts taught me the true value of leverage. I watched my bank account slowly creep from the negative back into the black, and with every milestone, my ambition grew sharper. I was not just digging myself out of a hole, I built a new fortress. Within 2 years, my relentless grind began to yield undeniable results. I was promoted to senior associate. Bypassing colleagues who had been at the firm a decade longer, I earned a reputation for being an absolute shark on the negotiating table. I possessed a unique ability to read people, to spot the exact moment a founder realized their company was overvalued. I used the trauma of my betrayal as a lens. Having seen firsthand how easily people could lie, I never took a corporate projection at face value. I dug until I found the rot. By my 30th birthday, the grueling hours and ruthless negotiations paid off in a spectacular fashion. I was poached by a massive investment syndicate and given the title of Director of Tech Acquisitions. My salary quadrupled overnight. The windowless studio was replaced by a sleek, minimalist penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The consignment shop suits were swapped for custom-tailored pieces. I had achieved the financial security I craved. But the hunger inside me remained entirely unsated. I became known in the industry as a closer, a woman devoid of sentimentality who could orchestrate a $100 million acquisition without breaking a sweat. I fired incompetent executives without a second thought. The fragile, trusting girl who had begged a venue manager to cancel an order was completely dead, replaced by a formidable executive who dictated terms and crushed opposition. Yet, amidst the wealth and growing influence, my personal life remained a heavily guarded fortress. I attended corporate galas alone. I kept my digital footprint completely erased. There were no social media profiles, no vacation photos, no breadcrumbs for anyone from my past to follow. To the outside world, I was a ghost who only materialized in boardrooms to finalize massive corporate takeovers. I wanted Julian and Chloe to believe their betrayal had ruined me, that I had faded into obscurity. The total isolation was a highly deliberate and calculated choice. I refused to let anyone close enough to inflict that kind of damage again. My inner circle consisted solely of my sister Clara, my brother-in-law Marcus, and the select few corporate allies I deemed useful. Every single waking moment was fully dedicated to the climb. The higher I went, the more power I accumulated, and the closer I got to the ultimate goal. I was playing a long game, waiting for the perfect, inevitable moment when the universe would align and present me with the opportunity to collect the debt they truly owed me. The exact moment the trap would spring shut was always in the back of my mind. But my laser focus on professional dominance eventually brought me face to face with the only force capable of disrupting my carefully orchestrated isolation. The perfect distraction from my quiet surveillance arrived in the form of a hostile takeover. My syndicate was targeting a massive biotech firm. The deal was valued at nearly $2 billion, and I was leading the acquisition team. We had spent 4 grueling months mapping out every vulnerability, every hidden liability, and every bloated executive salary we intended to slash. The final negotiation was set for a Tuesday morning in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the financial district. I walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit, armed with a binder full of financial forensics that would force their board to capitulate. I expected to obliterate their legal team before lunch. I did not expect Victor Sterling. Victor was representing a rival investment firm that had secretly acquired a massive block of shares, essentially hijacking our takeover attempt. He was 36 at the time, already a billionaire, and possessing a reputation that mirrored my own. He was ruthless, calculating, and completely devoid of sentimentality in business. He sat at the opposite end of the mahogany table, exuding the relaxed confidence of an apex predator who already knew he had won. His legal team looked smug. My own team looked panicked. I just opened my binder. The meeting commenced, and it was an absolute bloodbath. Victor attempted to dictate the terms, laying out a restructuring plan that heavily favored his firm. He spoke with a smooth, commanding baritone, completely dismissing my syndicate and our initial offer. When he finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and looked directly at me, expecting submission. Instead, I tore his entire proposal to shreds. I systematically dismantled his valuation model, exposing a glaring flaw in their projected revenue growth that his analysts had completely missed. I did not raise my voice. I did not show anger. I used cold, hard numbers to box him into a corner. I watched the smugness evaporate from his legal team. But Victor did not look angry. He looked fascinated. For the next 4 hours, the rest of the room faded into background noise. It became a high-speed intellectual chess match between the two of us. Every trap he laid, I bypassed. Every aggressive counter-offer I made, he scrutinized and parried with lethal accuracy. We communicated in the highly specific language of corporate finance, trading maneuvers with absolute precision. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and entirely unprecedented. I had never met a man who did not either try to patronize me or shrink away from my aggression. Victor did neither. He met my intensity stride for stride, treating me not as a woman to be managed, but as a formidable adversary to be respected. By the time we finally hammered out a joint acquisition agreement that merged our interests, the sun was setting over the city skyline. As the room emptied, Victor remained seated. He watched me pack my heavily annotated documents into my briefcase. He did not offer a sleazy compliment or a patronizing pat on the back. He simply said, "Your analysts missed the offshore tax liabilities in Section 4. But your countermeasure on the intellectual property rights was brilliant. You saved this deal from becoming a bureaucratic nightmare." I looked at him, recognizing a kindred spirit hiding behind a tailored suit. "Your revenue projections were an arrogant fiction," I replied smoothly, "but your restructuring timeline is highly efficient. I will have my team draft the final contracts by tomorrow morning." That brutal negotiation was the unexpected foundation of our entire relationship. Victor did not ask me out on a traditional date. He invited me to review a distressed asset portfolio over black coffee at 5 in the morning. We bonded over profit margins, risk assessments, and a shared intolerance for incompetence. Our courtship was quiet, intense, and completely hidden from the public eye. There were no grand romantic gestures or public displays of affection. Instead, there was profound, unwavering mutual respect. We were two apex predators who had finally found someone they did not have to hold back around. Victor never asked about my past, and I never volunteered the details of my humiliation. He understood that whoever I was before I became a corporate titan did not matter. He valued the woman standing in front of him, a woman who could dissect a financial statement faster than his best analysts and who never backed down from a fight. For the first time in my life, I felt entirely secure with a man, not because he had money, but because he saw my intellect as an asset rather than a threat. He did not need to diminish me to feel powerful. We operated as absolute equals. a united front that terrified our competitors and multiplied our respective empires. Our romance was built on a foundation of absolute truth. We did not play games. We did not manipulate. The trauma of my past, the betrayal that had forged my heavy armor, slowly began to feel less like a gaping wound and more like a faded scar. Victor did not heal me. I had already healed myself through grueling work and sheer determination. But Victor gave me a reason to build a life beyond mere survival and vengeance. He showed me that a partnership could be a multiplier of strength rather than a draining liability. As we merged our lives with the same precision we used to merge corporations, I realized I had found the ultimate ally. My fortress was no longer a solitary confinement. It was an empire ruled by two Ender 70, and with Victor standing firmly by my side, I knew my impending strike against Julian and Chloe would be absolutely devastating. Our wedding was the exact antithesis of the nightmare Julian had abandoned me to 8 years prior. There were no embossed invitations, no sprawling guest lists, and absolutely no velvet pedestals or overpriced silk gowns. Victor and I drove to a private coastal estate he owned just outside the city limits. We wore tailored suits. We did not need an audience to validate our commitment. We only needed each other and the very few people who had proven their absolute loyalty when I was at my lowest point. My sister Clara stood beside me, radiating a quiet, fierce pride. She had watched me claw my way out of financial ruin. And now she was watching me merge my life with an equal ours. Beside her stood Marcus, my brilliant brother-in-law who had been the one to pull me from the wreckage of my apartment all those years ago. Now, this towering, impeccably dressed corporate litigator stood as the official witness to the most powerful merger of my life. The ceremony was short, legally binding, and deeply profound. We drank a single bottle of vintage champagne on the terrace, overlooking the crashing waves. It was the cementing of an unbreakable alliance. That afternoon on the terrace solidified what I had come to call my chosen family. I had learned the hard way that proximity and shared history did not equal loyalty. Loyalty was forged in the trenches. Victor understood this perfectly. He integrated seamlessly with Clara and Marcus, recognizing instantly that they were not just my relatives, but my most trusted advisors. The synergy between Victor and Marcus was particularly lethal. They were two men who operated at the absolute highest echelons of corporate power. Within months of our wedding, Marcus formally transitioned from his senior partnership at his old firm to become the chief legal officer for our newly combined investment syndicate. Marcus became the master architect of our corporate empire. He structured the trusts, the shell companies, and the holding firms that kept our wealth entirely insulated from public scrutiny. When Victor and I identified a target for acquisition, Marcus built the legal labyrinth that made our takeovers unstoppable. We were an impenetrable unit. Clara provided the emotional grounding, running a highly successful philanthropic foundation funded by our acquisitions, while Marcus, Victor, and I dominated the financial sector. We ate dinner together every Sunday. We celebrated every quarterly victory. We were a fortress, and no one from the outside could breach our walls. This fortress became infinitely more important 2 years later with the birth of our son, Max. Becoming a mother fundamentally altered the architecture of my ambition. When the nurse placed Max in my arms for the very first time, a profound, terrifying wave of protective instinct washed over me. I looked down at his dark hair and his tiny hands, and I realized that my empire was no longer just a monument to my survival. It was his legacy. Victor proved to be as dedicated a father as he was a founder. The man who ruthlessly dismantled tech monopolies would happily spend his evenings sitting on the floor of our penthouse, assembling intricate wooden train sets. He shifted his grueling travel schedule, ensuring he was home for bedtime reading. never allowing our corporate responsibilities to eclipse our family. Seeing Victor with Max healed a part of me I did not even know was still bruised. It showed me what true partnership looked like in practice, stripping away the lingering shadows of my past betrayal. Max grew into a bright child who absorbed the energy of our household. He spent his weekends riding on Marcus's shoulders and helping Clara bake in her sprawling kitchen. He was surrounded by a chosen family that loved him fiercely and protected him absolutely. He did not know about the cruelty of the world yet, and I was determined to ensure he would only ever face it from a position of absolute strength. Everything Victor and I built, every company we acquired, every real estate portfolio we expanded was structured to guarantee Max an untouchable future. As Max approached his 5th birthday, our syndicate reached unprecedented heights. We were untouchable. My net worth was a figure that would have made the 26-year-old version of myself pass out from shock. But the wealth was secondary to the security. I had constructed a reality where no one could ever pull the rug out from under me again. I held all the cards. I controlled the board. I was the master of my own fate. And yet the meticulous surveillance file Marcus updated every quarter remained in my desk drawer. Julian and Chloe were still out there drowning in their pathetic, fabricated lives, completely oblivious to the predators circling their sinking ship. Having Max only sharpened my resolve. I wanted to eradicate the very concept of people like Julian and Chloe. I wanted to ensure that the kind of malicious, opportunistic betrayal they specialized in was met with a consequence so severe it would leave a permanent scar on their existence. My chosen family was my shield. But my past trauma remained my sword. The peace and happiness I found with Victor, Max, Clara, and Marcus did not dilute my desire for retribution. If anything, experiencing true loyalty only highlighted the absolute depravity of what Julian and Chloe had done. They had stolen from me, humiliated me, and left me for dead. I had risen from those ashes, built an impenetrable kingdom, and surrounded myself with titans. The waiting game was finally coming to an end. The pieces were all perfectly aligned on the board. All I needed now was the right bait to draw them out of their miserable little lives and directly into the crosshairs of my perfectly constructed corporate guillotine. The opportunity to drop the blade of that corporate guillotine presented itself on a rainy Tuesday morning. It did not arrive with a dramatic flourish or a blaring siren. It arrived in a thick cream-colored envelope tucked neatly between a quarterly earnings report and a charity gala invitation on my mahogany desk. I picked up the envelope, noting the gold-embossed seal of my former university. Inside was a heavy cardstock invitation to our 10-year alumni gala. The University Alumni Association had finally managed to track down my corporate address, piercing through the thick layer of anonymity I had paid good money to maintain. I read the elegant cursive script detailing the upcoming ballroom gala, the ticket prices, and the promise of a nostalgic evening reconnecting with old friends. I felt absolutely nothing. Nostalgia was a useless emotion, a comforting lie people told themselves when their present reality was disappointing. My present reality was a multi-billion-dollar empire. I had no desire to drink cheap wine and exchange forced pleasantries with people who had either pitied me or laughed at me a decade ago. Without a second thought, I tossed the gold-embossed invitation directly into the shredder bin beneath my desk and turned my attention back to the massive acquisition portfolio waiting on my monitor. I forgot about the gala entirely until Sunday evening. Victor and I were hosting our usual family dinner at the penthouse. Max was asleep in his room, exhausted from spending the entire afternoon building a towering block city with his father. Marcus and Clara had stayed behind for a glass of vintage scotch. While Clara relaxed on the velvet sofa, Marcus walked over to the kitchen island. Placing a thick leather-bound dossier on the marble surface, this was not his usual quarterly update on our personal assets. Marcus had a specific, predatory gleam in his dark eyes. The exact look he got right before dismantling an opposing legal team in court. I pulled the financial disclosures for the Vertex Solutions acquisition. Marcus said, his deep voice carrying a note of dangerous amusement. Victor walked over, handing me a glass of scotch before leaning against the counter. Vertex Solutions was a mid-tier regional software distributor we had been aggressively targeting for a hostile takeover. They had decent proprietary software, but their management was grossly incompetent. The company was bleeding capital, drowning in operational inefficiencies, and desperately seeking a buyout to avoid filing for bankruptcy. As the vice president of global tech acquisitions, it was my job to execute the takeover, liquidate their useless assets, and absorb their tech into our syndicate. I reviewed the disclosures yesterday, I said, taking a sip of my drink. Their regional branches are a financial disaster. I am planning to dissolve at least 3 of them immediately upon acquisition. The severance packages will be minimal. Marcus tapped the leather folder with a heavy gold pen. You are going to want to dissolve their Pacific Northwest branch personally, Elena. I ran a full background check on their executive roster to identify potential legal liabilities before we finalize the hostile bid. Look at the regional vice president for that specific branch. I set my glass down and opened the dossier. Marcus had highlighted a single name on the organizational chart. Julian, my ex-fiancé. The man who had drained my bank accounts, humiliated me on the eve of my wedding, and stolen $50. Ling 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 was the regional vice president of the exact failing branch I was preparing to liquidate. I stared at the name printed in stark black ink. The sheer magnitude of the coincidence was staggering. In a country of millions, in a corporate landscape spanning endless sectors, Julian had managed to tie his entire fraudulent, debt-ridden lifestyle to a company that was currently sitting squarely in my crosshairs. Marcus leaned forward, resting his hands on the marble island. Julian makes a low 6-figure salary, but his performance metrics are abysmal. He has been surviving at Vertex Solutions purely by pushing off debts and falsifying growth projections. Sound familiar? He is terrified of this acquisition. If Vertex goes under, or if the new parent company fires him, his entire house of cards collapses. He cannot afford his leased mansion. Chloe cannot afford the commercial rent for her failing art galleries. They will be bankrupt within 30 days of his termination. Victor looked at the dossier, a slow, dark smile spreading across his face. He wrapped his arm around my waist, his presence a solid anchor of power. It seems your past has just walked directly onto our chopping block, my love. How do you want to handle the execution? My mind raced, processing the incredible leverage I now held. Julian was completely at my mercy. I held the power to destroy his career, repossess his lifestyle, and push him into financial ruin with a single stroke of my pen. He had absolutely no idea that the faceless corporate syndicate preparing to swallow his company whole was directed by the woman he had discarded like trash. He thought he was untouchable. He thought his upgrade with Chloe was secure. I closed the folder. The silence in the kitchen was heavy with anticipation. Marcus and Victor were watching me, waiting for the order to strike. Suddenly, the memory of that gold-embossed envelope flashed in my mind. The 10-year alumni gala. The event was scheduled for the exact same week. The Vertex Solutions acquisition was set to be finalized and publicly announced. Julian would undoubtedly attend the gala to flaunt his fake wealth, to project an image of success, and to network desperately in hopes of finding a lifeline before his branch was axed. I walked out of the kitchen, crossed the penthouse to my home office, and retrieved the shredded pieces of the gala invitation from the bin. I walked back and dropped the torn heavy cardstock onto the marble island. Marcus, I said, my voice cold and precise. Draft the final acquisition paperwork for Vertex Solutions. Make sure the Pacific Northwest branch is entirely isolated for immediate liquidation. I want no severance packages offered. Victor. Freeze any external hiring within our network so he cannot jump ship to a competitor. Victor kissed my temple. Consider it done. What about the gala? I looked at the torn invitation. I am going to RSVP. Julian and Chloe have spent the last 8 years believing they won. They need an audience to validate their illusions. I am going to give them exactly what they want. I will attend the gala. I will let them mock me. I will let them dig their own graves in front of everyone they want to impress. And then I am going to drop the anvil. Marcus let out a deep, booming laugh that echoed through the penthouse. It is a beautiful trap, Elena. They will never see it coming. The plan was set. I was not just going to fire Julian. I was going to humiliate him on the exact same scale he had humiliated me. I was going to strip away his arrogant facade in front of his peers, expose his financial ruin, and watch him realize that the woman he called a nobody was actually the god of his fragile universe. I poured myself another measure of scotch, the anticipation burning bright and hot in my veins. The ghost was finally coming out of the shadows. The following morning, the atmosphere in my executive office crackled with a distinct predatory energy. The decision to attend the gala had shifted my focus from a standard corporate acquisition to a highly personalized surgical strike. I arrived at the syndicate headquarters before the sun had even crested the city skyline, bypassing the usual morning briefings to lock myself inside my suite. I needed to dissect every single variable of the trap we were setting. Julian was already neatly packaged for slaughter on the corporate chopping block. But a hostile takeover of his software branch was only half the equation. To truly dismantle the illusion they had built over the last 8 years, I needed to obliterate Chloe entirely. I sat behind my desk booting up my secure terminal as Marcus walked through the double glass doors. He carried 2 massive cups of black coffee and a secondary leather-bound folder much thicker than the one he had presented at the penthouse the night before. He placed the coffee in front of me and dropped the folder with a heavy, satisfying thud. "We handled Julian last night," Marcus said, pulling up a chair and unbuttoning his suit jacket. "But I promised you a complete forensic breakdown of their combined liabilities. If you want to burn their kingdom to the ground, you need to see exactly what Chloe has been doing with her curation studios." I opened the folder. The first page was a master summary of Chloe's business entity. She operated 3 high-end art galleries located in prime commercial retail districts across the state. For years, she had weaponized these studios on social media, posting heavily filtered photos of herself sipping champagne in front of her branded storefronts. She sold the image of a fiercely independent successful curator who had built an art empire from scratch. I flipped to the financial disclosures, and the reality was absolutely pathetic. The galleries were hemorrhaging cash at an alarming rate. Chloe was a deeply incompetent manager, running a vanity project fueled entirely by catastrophic debt. Her profit margins were negative and her inventory turnover rate was dismal. "Look at the commercial lease agreements," Marcus instructed, tapping a manicured finger against the dossier. "Specifically, look at the property management holding companies she makes her monthly rent payments to." I turned the page, my eyes scanning the dense legal jargon of her commercial leases. The addresses of her 3 galleries were listed clearly. 2 were located in upscale outdoor shopping promenades, and the flagship studio was situated in a highly coveted downtown retail block. My gaze drifted to the lesser information. The properties were managed by a commercial real estate trust named Aurora Holdings. A slow, cold chill washed over my skin as the realization clicked into place. Aurora Holdings was not just a random corporate entity. It was one of the primary shell companies Marcus had structured for my personal real estate portfolio 3 years ago. I used it to acquire distressed commercial properties, renovate them, and lease them out to high-yield tenants. It was a completely anonymous trust, heavily insulated by layers of corporate privacy laws. ensuring my name never appeared on a single public tax record. I looked up at Marcus, my heart hammering a steady, triumphant rhythm against my ribs. I own the buildings. Marcus offered a slow, lethal smile that mirrored my own. You own the buildings, Elena. You hold the master lease for every single square foot of retail space. Chloe operates. She has been wiring her exorbitant monthly rent directly into your private equity portfolio for the last 36 months. You are quite literally financing your own empire with the desperate borrowed cash she uses to maintain her fake lifestyle. The sheer absolute poetry of the situation was intoxicating. Chloe had stolen my floral and venue funds to finance her betrayal, and now, 8 years later, she was unknowingly paying me a massive monthly premium just to keep her fraudulent business afloat. But the poetry was about to turn into a nightmare. I looked back down at the ledger. There was a glaring column of numbers highlighted in red ink. She is in default, I stated, tracing the figures with my pen. She has missed the last 4 rent payments on the flagship location and is 60 days behind on the other 2 properties. Exactly, Marcus confirmed, leaning back in his chair. The property management firm working under Aurora Holdings has been sending her standard delinquency notices. They were preparing to initiate standard eviction protocols next week. I intervened and placed a hard freeze on all collection actions regarding her specific company. I wanted you to see this before the management firm pulled the trigger. I stared at the red numbers. The exact mechanism of her destruction laid bare in front of me. If a commercial tenant defaulted on their lease, the landlord possessed the right to lock the doors, seize the remaining inventory, and sue for the entire remaining balance of the lease term. Chloe was entirely at my mercy. I could render her bankrupt and lock her out of her own galleries with a single phone call. The dominoes were perfectly set in a flawless, inescapable line. Julian was about to lose his job, his income, and his professional reputation in my hostile takeover. Simultaneously, Chloe was about to lose her business, her inventory, and her storefronts to my eviction notice. They were entirely dependent on these 2 fragile pillars to uphold their arrogant debt-fueled reality. And I held the sledgehammer that would smash both pillars at the exact same time. Do not let the property management firm send another warning, I instructed Marcus, my voice cold and resolute. Have our internal legal team draft the final eviction notices, the asset seizure warrants, and the lawsuit for the breached contract damages. But hold the paperwork. Do not file it with the courts. And do not serve her. Marcus nodded, his legal mind already processing the timeline. You want to serve her after the gala. I want to serve her the morning after the gala, I corrected, closing the leather-bound folder with a sharp, decisive snap. I want them to walk into that ballroom feeling like royalty. I want them to look me in the eye, mock my plain clothes, and brag about their incredible success. I want them to reach the absolute highest peak of their arrogant delusion, because when they wake up the next morning, Julian will receive his termination papers from my acquisition team, and Chloe will find chains on the doors of her galleries, courtesy of my real estate trust. Marcus stood up, gathering the coffee cups. He looked down at me with profound respect. You are going to dismantle them so thoroughly. They will not even have ashes left to sweep up. As Marcus walked out of my office, I turned my chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Below me, millions of people rushed through their day completely oblivious to the financial warfare being waged in the towers above. Julian and Chloe were somewhere out there, likely stressing over their credit card limits while picking out expensive outfits for the gala. They thought they had won the game 8 years ago by breaking all the rules. They had no idea the game was already over. The ghost had stepped out of the shadows, locked the doors, and set the building on fire. The flames were invisible, but the heat was already rising. The remaining days of the week leading up to the 10-year alumni gala required a masterclass in psychological compartmentalization. During the day, I directed my acquisition teams to finalize the lethal paperwork that would absorb Vertex Solutions and liquidate their Pacific Northwest branch. At night, I sat in the quiet luxury of my penthouse, mentally rehearsing the impending execution. Victor watched my preparation with a mixture of dark amusement and profound respect. He understood better than anyone the primal need to settle an outstanding debt. However, when I told him I intended to walk into the hotel ballroom completely alone, he initially pushed back. We were sitting in his private study on Thursday evening. Victor poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed me one, his brow furrowed in a rare display of concern. "You do not have to face them by yourself, Elena," he said, his deep voice echoing in the quiet room. "I can clear my schedule. I will walk in there with you, and we can crush them together before the appetizers are even served." I smiled. Taking a slow sip of the amber liquid, I knew Victor wanted nothing more than to stand beside me and physically shield me from the people who had caused me such profound agony. But deploying a billionaire founder as a shield was exactly what a weak person would do. "I need them to think I am weak, Victor," I explained, leaning back against the leather sofa. "If I walk in there on your arm dripping in diamonds and flanked by your personal security detail, they will immediately know they have lost. They will cower and apologize and play the victim. I do not want their apologies. I want their absolute, unadulterated arrogance. I want them to look at me and feel superior. I need them to dig the hole as deep as possible so that when the dirt finally caves in, they have absolutely no way out. You and Max will make your entrance later. Let me set the stage first." Victor slowly nodded, his eyes gleaming with a predatory understanding. He clinked his glass against mine. Conceding to my strategy, the next phase of my preparation was entirely aesthetic. I needed a costume that projected failure, or at least a very mundane middle-class mediocrity. This was the art of stealth wealth. The truly wealthy do not need to scream their net worth through massive logos or flashy accessories. They whisper it through flawless tailoring and exclusive fabrics that only the trained eye can recognize. Julian and Chloe did not possess trained eyes. They were obsessed with the loud, audible W. Desperate performance of wealth. Heavily branded belts, leased luxury cars, and giant synthetic diamonds. They equated visible branding with actual success. I scheduled a private consultation with my personal stylist and gave her a very specific directive. I needed an outfit that a struggling mid-level manager would wear to a gala to desperately prove she was doing fine. My stylist produced an unbranded bespoke charcoal dress. It lacked any visible logos or flashy hardware. To the untrained eye, it looked like something purchased off the rack at a mid-tier department store for maybe $200. In reality, it was a custom-tailored masterpiece, woven from pure vicuna wool and silk, created by an exclusive artisan in Milan. It fit me with absolute mathematical perfection. But it screamed ordinary. I applied the same philosophy to my accessories. I locked my actual engagement ring, a flawless 6-carat emerald-cut diamond, inside the biometric safe in my dressing room. Instead, I wore a simple, unadorned gold band. I carried a minimalist black leather clutch devoid of any interlocking designer logos. I wore absolutely no jewelry, other than a pair of small pearl earrings. I instructed my makeup artist to create a look that was polished but tired, utilizing muted tones that made me look slightly overworked and profoundly unimpressive. I wanted to look exactly like the tragic, jilted bride they expected to see. On the evening of the gala, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my dressing room, performing a final psychological check. I stared deeply into my own eyes, searching for any lingering trace of the terrified 26-year-old girl who had hyperventilated on the floor of an empty apartment. She was gone. The woman staring back at me was cold, calculating, and entirely untouchable. I was a corporate titan masquerading as prey. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was a heavy, intoxicating narcotic. I was not walking into a gala. I was walking into a slaughterhouse. And I was holding all the locks. I bypassed my usual transportation. I instructed my driver to leave my customized armored sports utility vehicle in the underground garage. I certainly was not going to pull up to the venue in a chauffeured $500,000 luxury tank. Instead, Marcus had quietly arranged for a standard mid-range sedan. A generic silver rental car that blended perfectly into the mundane traffic of the city. I grabbed the keys, descended into the garage, and drove myself into the downtown district. The drive was an exercise in absolute mental discipline. The rain-slicked streets reflected the neon lights of the financial district, the very buildings I owned and operated within. I thought about the sheer magnitude of the empire Marcus, Victor, and I had built. As I navigated the traffic toward the Grand Hotel hosting the event, I visualized the legal documents currently sitting in Marcus's secure briefcase, the eviction notices, the termination papers, the financial ruin of the two people who had tried to bury me. My heartbeat remained steady, perfectly controlled. I pulled into the circular driveway of the venue, watching a parade of heavily leased luxury cars aggressively jockeying for position at the valet stand. It was a pathetic display of financial insecurity masked as success. I handed the keys of my generic silver rental car to the valet attendant. Giving him a polite, subdued smile, I smoothed the invisible wrinkles from my bespoke charcoal dress, adjusted my plain black clutch, and walked through the revolving glass doors of the hotel. The grand lobby was already swarming with former classmates, their loud voices echoing off the marble walls. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air of the lobby fill my lungs. The game was officially on. I stepped onto the plush carpet and walked straight toward the ballroom, ready to let them mistake my silence for surrender. The grand ballroom was a chaotic symphony of clinking glassware and desperate networking. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over attendees, summarizing a decade of existence into 30-second elevator pitches. I glided through the perimeter, my customized charcoal dress moving with fluid grace. I declined a passing tray of hors d'oeuvres, opting for sparkling water from the bar. From my vantage point near an elaborate ice sculpture, I had a tactical view. They positioned themselves directly in the center of the room. Julian and Chloe were putting on a masterclass in fraudulent prosperity. Julian held court with mid-level recruiters, gesturing broadly to ensure his oversized luxury watch caught the light. I knew the watch was leased at an exorbitant interest rate. His flashy suit bunched at the shoulders, manifesting his immense financial strain. He looked tired beneath his artificial tan. There was a frantic energy in his laugh, the performance of a man praying to secure a new job before impending corporate slaughter. Chloe was a tragic spectacle, draped over Julian's arm. She wore a metallic dress that screamed for validation. Her fingers were adorned with ostentatious rings. Clutching a designer handbag, I recognized instantly. It was a limited edition piece expensed to her gallery's revolving credit account just 3 weeks ago. Pushing her closer to default, she tossed her head back, playing the triumphant wealthy wife, but her eyes darted nervously, calculating who was important enough to talk to. She was drowning in late notices, desperately using metallic fabric to reflect light away from her ruin. I stood quietly by the ice sculpture, sipping my water, letting cold satisfaction wash over me. They were standing on a trapdoor I had built. Unaware, I held the lever. I watched them perform, observing their subtle tells of panic. Julian kept checking his phone, likely waiting for an email from the acquiring syndicate. Chloe kept adjusting her posture aggressively, signaling superiority to classmates who opted for authentic lives. Eventually, Chloe's restless gaze swept across the perimeter and locked directly onto me. I saw the physical jolt register in her body. She stiffened, her manicured hand gripping Julian's bicep. She whispered in his ear, pointing discreetly in my direction. Julian turned, his eyes widening in momentary shock before shifting into profound, arrogant amusement. He whispered back, puffing out his chest. They saw my unbranded dress and my lack of flashy jewelry. They saw exactly what I wanted them to see. A defeated, solitary ghost. Chloe detached herself and began marching toward me, navigating the crowded floor with the aggressive strut of a predator closing in on wounded prey. I maintained my relaxed posture against the ice table, my expression utterly blank. Elena. Chloe gasped as she closed the final few feet. She placed a hand over her chest, feigning breathless shock. I literally cannot believe my eyes. You actually came. I took a slow, measured breath. Hello, Chloe. She stepped closer. Her perfume, a suffocating cloud of synthetic jasmine. She reached out, attempting to place a pitying hand on my arm. I shifted my weight slightly, causing her hand to grasp empty air. She recovered quickly, tilting her head with an expression of deeply manufactured sympathy. Look at you, she cooed, her eyes raking over my charcoal dress with barely concealed disdain. You are so brave for showing up tonight. Julian and I were just talking about you. We were wondering if you were still living in the city. You have just been so quiet all these years. We honestly thought you might have moved back in with distant relatives after everything that happened. I live in the city, I replied evenly. I have been very focused on my work. Work, she repeated, drawing the word out as if it were a quaint concept. That is so good for you, Elena. Keeping busy is important for the healing process. What is it you are doing now? Still crunching numbers in a cubicle somewhere? The corporate grind can be exhausting when doing it all on your own. I work in tech acquisitions, I stated simply. It keeps me fully occupied. Chloe offered a condescending smile. Well, as long as it pays the rent. Julian and I have been so incredibly blessed. He is the regional vice president at his software firm now. My art galleries are expanding so rapidly it is hard to keep up. We are looking at buying a second vacation home soon. We feel so lucky that we followed our hearts. The sheer audacity of her lie was a masterpiece of human delusion. She was standing there weeks away from having padlocks placed on her storefronts by my legal team, bragging about buying a vacation home. It took every ounce of my disciplined corporate training not to laugh directly in her heavily contoured face. That sounds remarkably ambitious, I said, allowing ice to creep into my tone. Expansion requires a great deal of capital. I hope your commercial leases are securely managed. Chloe blinked, a microscopic fracture appearing in her confident facade. The terminology briefly confused her, but her arrogance smoothed it over. We have people for that. We delegate trivial details to focus on the big picture. Honestly, I am just so relieved to see you doing okay. Julian felt terrible about how things ended, but we knew you would eventually find your footing. It builds character. Right. Before I could dissect the psychological absurdity of her claiming to build my character by stealing my floral and venue funds, Julian materialized beside her. He slipped his arm around her waist in a performative display of ownership. His gaze lingered on my plain black clutch. Elena, Julian said, dripping false warmth. It has been a long time. It takes guts to show up to an event like this, looking like you do. I tilted my head, studying his desperate need to establish dominance. It takes even more courage to live a complete lie. I replied quietly, watching his incredibly arrogant, forced smile slowly begin to falter. Julian recovered quickly, his ego shielding him against my jab. He let out a harsh bark of laughter, running a hand over his straining suit jacket. "A complete lie," he repeated, shaking his head as if pitying a child. "Elena, you always had a flair for the dramatic. That is why you never made it past the lower rungs of the corporate ladder. You let emotions dictate reality. Chloe and I live in the real world. We deal in tangible success." He gestured expansively around the ballroom. "You mentioned you work in acquisitions. What is that?" "Processing paperwork for some mid-tier holding company." I kept my hands still at my sides, my voice maintaining a flat rhythm. "I handle the structural integration of acquired assets." I said, "I evaluate regional branches, identify operational redundancies, and eliminate them. I decide what parts of a company survive a buyout and what parts are liquidated." Chloe scoffed, swirling the champagne in her glass. "Sounds incredibly tedious," she remarked, inspecting her manicured nails. "Julian handles actual leadership. He manages people, drives revenue, and builds culture. His branch has been so incredibly successful that the parent company is undergoing a massive strategic merger." She leaned closer, dropping into a boastful whisper. "We are not supposed to talk about it publicly yet, but Julian is about to secure a massive promotion. The acquiring syndicate recognizes top-tier talent." Julian puffed out his chest, unable to resist inflating his own mythology. "It is a highly sensitive transition," he declared, adjusting his watch again. "Vertex Solutions is being absorbed by one of the largest investment syndicates on the East Coast. The restructuring is going to be brutal for dead weight in the company. But for high performers like myself, it is a golden ticket." I have a closed-door meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning with the CEO of the acquiring firm. He is flying in personally to review my branch metrics. I allowed a razor-thin smile to grace my lips. The absolute delusion of the man standing in front of me was a fascinating psychological study. "A private meeting with the CEO," I repeated, tasting the irony. "That sounds critical. I have heard the CEO of that particular syndicate is notoriously ruthless. He does not tolerate financial padding or fabricated growth projections. He terminates underperforming vice presidents without offering severance packages." A bead of sweat appeared at the edge of Julian's hairline, betraying the intense pressure cooking beneath his artificial tan. He shifted his weight, his defensive instincts flaring. "You read too many sensationalized blogs, Elena," he snapped, losing his forced warmth. "Men at that level understand regional management complexities. They know how to identify executives who drive aggressive expansion. The big boss and I speak the exact same language. We are both apex predators. Once I present my quarterly turnaround strategy tomorrow, he will have no choice but to name me senior vice president. It is a guaranteed promotion." Chloe chimed in, stepping closer to Julian. "We are already meeting with our broker next week to look at properties in the hills. The bonus structure alone will completely transform our portfolio. It is just a whole different stratosphere of wealth, Elena. You probably cannot even conceptualize the numbers we are dealing with." I looked at Chloe, locking onto her with cold, predatory stillness. I could conceptualize the numbers perfectly. I had personally authorized the foreclosure protocols on her 3 gallery locations just yesterday. I knew the exact dollar amount of the devastating legal fees she was about to face. "I am sure the numbers are staggering," I replied smoothly. Maintaining multiple commercial leases while anticipating a corporate buyout requires a delicate balancing act. One wrong move, and the entire structure collapses. Julian scowled, clearly annoyed that I was not awed by his impending ascension. "We do not worry about collapse," he stated firmly. "We build solid foundations. That is the difference between us and you. You play it safe." Hiding in the background. Nursing ancient grudges. We take massive risks and reap massive rewards. Tomorrow morning, my entire career elevates to the executive board level. And you will still be sitting in a cubicle processing paperwork for other people's victories. Before I could respond, a palpable shift in the ballroom atmosphere commanded our attention. The low hum of networking and forced laughter tapered off, replaced by a rising tide of frantic, hushed whispers. The jazz band playing softly in the corner abruptly stopped mid-measure. The heavy brass double doors at the main entrance were suddenly flanked by 4 men wearing dark suits and earpieces. These were not standard event security. They moved with the synchronized, hyper-vigilant precision of an executive protection detail. Julian noticed the shift immediately. He craned his neck, trying to see over the crowd forming near the entrance. "What is going on?" he muttered, his bravado temporarily forgotten as he strained to identify the source of the commotion. The tension in the room thickened, transforming the air into a heavy weight. The event organizers scurried nervously around the entrance, speaking into their headsets. A few of our former classmates recognized the security detail and began elbowing each other, their faces pale with shock. The murmurs sweeping through the crowd carried fragments of a name that caused Julian's entire body to go rigid. "Is that someone famous?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "Julian, look at the doors. People say a billionaire just walked in. Why would someone like that be at our alumni gala?" Julian did not answer. He stared at the entrance, his jaw locked, his eyes wide with a sudden, inexplicable terror. The arrogant executive who had just bragged about his impending promotion was rapidly devolving into a panicked animal, realizing he was trapped in a cage. I stood perfectly still, my posture relaxed, my hands empty. The trap I had spent 8 years building was finally springing shut, and the executioner was walking right through the front door. Victor Sterling stepped through the double brass doors with the effortless command of a man who owned the building and everyone inside it. He wore a bespoke midnight blue suit that draped perfectly over his broad shoulders. But it was the child resting comfortably on his left hip that completely short-circuited the ballroom. Max, wearing a miniature blazer identical to his father, scanned the sea of stunned faces with bright, curious eyes. The ambient noise of the gala died instantly. The only sound was the synchronized clicking of Victor's polished Oxfords against the marble entryway as he bypassed the frantic event organizers. The jazz band had ceased playing entirely. Julian began to hyperventilate. I watched the arrogant flush completely drain from his face, leaving behind a sickly, ashen gray. His chest heaved beneath his strained suit jacket. He recognized Victor immediately. Every executive at Vertex Solutions had memorized the face of the billionaire, orchestrating their hostile takeover. Julian's hands, previously tucked confidently into his pockets, were now shaking visibly at his sides. He took a stumbling half-step backward, instinctively trying to use Chloe as a human shield. The man who had just claimed to be an apex predator was visibly shrinking into a terrified prey animal. Chloe remained oblivious to the corporate hierarchy, but she understood wealth and power. She stared at Victor with hungry, wide eyes, completely misreading the situation. She smoothed her metallic dress, adjusting her posture as if hoping to catch the billionaire's eye, entirely unaware that the man she was ogling was the architect of her impending financial slaughter. She desperately wanted to be noticed by the most important person in the room. Victor cut a straight path through the parted crowd. Ignoring the frantic whispers of my former classmates, he did not look left or right. His dark, predatory eyes locked directly onto me. The ruthless corporate titan persona melted instantly, replaced by a warm www. Genuine smile reserved exclusively for his family. He stopped right in front of our small, tense circle. The collective gasp from the surrounding crowd was audible and evasive loud. He leaned down, placing a soft, lingering kiss on my cheek, his free hand resting securely on the small of my back. "I am sorry to interrupt your evening, sweetheart," Victor said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly in the dead quiet of the room. But Max absolutely insisted he needed his mother to tuck him in tonight. And frankly, I did not have the heart to tell him no. Max beamed, reaching his little arms out for me. "Mommy, you said you would read the space book." I smiled, running my hand through his dark hair, feeling the solid, grounding presence of my son. "I did say that. Did I not, my love?" "You are right on time, Victor." The sharp, unmistakable sound of shattering crystal pierced the silence. Chloe stood frozen, her fingers still curled around the stem of her champagne flute, while the bowl lay in glittering shards at her feet. A pool of expensive liquor seeped into the carpet. Her jaw was slack, her eyes darting frantically between Victor, Max, and me. The cognitive dissonance was breaking her brain. The woman she had just mocked for working in a cubicle was holding a billionaire's heir and being kissed by a corporate titan. Victor turned his attention to the trembling man, standing inches away. Julian was practically vibrating with terror. His breathing was ragged, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Victor extended his free hand with lethal politeness. "Victor Sterling," he said, his voice dropping into the cold, authoritative register he used in boardrooms. "I do not believe we have been formally introduced, though I recognize your name from the restructuring files. You are Julian, the Regional Vice President of the Pacific Northwest branch of Vertex Solutions." Julian swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing erratically. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple, cutting a path through his artificial tan. He reached out with a trembling, clammy hand to shake Victor's grasp. "Yes, sir. It is an absolute honor, Mr. Sterling. I have a meeting scheduled with you tomorrow morning regarding the transition. I have prepared a comprehensive, aggressive turnaround strategy for the entire region." Victor withdrew his hand, his expression turning to stone. "Actually, Julian, your meeting is not with me. I am the founder. But I do not handle the microscopic details of branch liquidations. I leave the structural execution to my Vice President of Global Tech Acquisitions." He stepped back, gesturing smoothly toward me. "My wife, Elena, holds absolute unilateral authority over the Vertex Solutions portfolio. She is the one who decides which branches survive the buyout and which executives are terminated without severance. You will be presenting your quarterly turnaround strategy to her tomorrow morning." The absolute physiological panic that seized Julian was a masterpiece of human devastation. His knees physically buckled, forcing him to grab the decorative pillar just to remain standing. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He gasped for air, his chest constricting as the catastrophic reality crushed his lungs. The woman he had just mocked, the woman he had abandoned with a $50,000 debt, was the exact corporate deity holding the axe over his entire career. He had just bragged about his massive upgrade to the very person who was actively writing his termination papers. Chloe stared at me, her face contorting in sheer horror. The arrogant, wealthy facade she had desperately maintained, completely disintegrated. She looked down at her fake designer shoes, then up at my unbranded custom-tailored dress. Finally understanding the catastrophic difference between performing wealth and actually wielding it, She tried to speak, to formulate some kind of apology or excuse. But her throat simply clicked dryly. She was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of her own miscalculation. I looked at Julian. My posture relaxed. My voice a deadly quiet whisper that carried the full weight of my corporate authority. As you mentioned earlier, Julian, it takes massive risks to reap massive rewards. I look forward to reviewing your branch metrics tomorrow at 8 sharp. Do not be late. We deal in tangible success after all. No hard feelings. It is just business. The transition from the hotel ballroom to my corporate office was seamless. By 7 in the morning, I was seated behind my mahogany desk. The city below was shrouded in fog, but inside my suite, the temperature was perfectly regulated. I reviewed the acquisition documents for Vertex Solutions one last time. Every single clause regarding the liquidation of the Pacific Northwest branch was ironclad. Marcus had ensured there were absolutely no loopholes. At precisely 7:15, the silence of my office was shattered by the ring of my private direct line. This line bypassed my assistant completely. It was reserved exclusively for board members, high-level stakeholders. And Victor, I picked up the receiver. The frantic, heavy breathing on the other end belonged to a man who had spent the entire night drowning in his impending ruin. Elena, please do not hang up. It was Julian. The audacity of his voice invading my sanctuary sent a ripple of revulsion through me. He must have desperately leveraged his expiring credentials to route a call directly through the executive switchboard. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the flashing red light on the console. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch across the connection, forcing him into the void. I know you are there. Julian snapped, his tone shifting to a pathetic attempt at aggressive dominance. I know you are listening. Look, we need to handle this, like adults. What happened last night was a complete ambush. You set me up. You intentionally let me walk into that ballroom blind so you could pull some power trip with your billionaire husband. I remained entirely silent. His inability to tolerate the quiet was his greatest weakness. The aggressive facade crumbled almost immediately, giving way to the frantic gaslighting that had once been his signature maneuver. You are clearly still holding on to anger, he continued, his voice taking on a patronizing cadence. I get it. I hurt you. But look at the bigger picture. If you are honest, you know I did you a massive favor. If I had married you, you would have settled for a mediocre life. My leaving you was the catalyst. I made you who you are today, Elena. You are sitting in that glass tower because I cut you loose. You owe me a thank you. The psychological acrobatics required to twist a $50,000 theft and a devastating betrayal into a philanthropic favor was astounding. He needed to believe it because the alternative was admitting he was a parasite who discarded a diamond to pick up a rock. Are you quite finished with your revisionist history, Julian? I spoke, my voice a flat, emotionless razor. You did not make me who I am. You proved exactly who you are. The woman sitting in this office was built in spite of you, not because of you. Do not confuse my resilience with your perceived benevolence. His breath hitched. The patronizing tone vanished, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. Elena, please. You cannot fire me. I have a mortgage I cannot afford. I have car leases. Chloe's art galleries are bleeding us dry. If I lose this job, if I lose this upcoming bonus structure, we lose everything. We will be bankrupt before the end of the month. The apex predator from the ballroom had been reduced to a whimpering, terrified child, begging for a financial lifeline from the exact woman he had mocked just 12 hours prior. I need this job, Elena. I need you to show some mercy. People make mistakes. You have billions of dollars now. You have everything. Firing me does nothing for you but satisfy a petty grudge. Please just keep the branch operational. Let me keep my title. I will do whatever you want. I will double my quotas. Just give me a chance to prove my worth to the new parent company. I swiveled my chair to face the window. I listened to a grown man dismantle his dignity over a phone line. He was offering empty promises, completely oblivious to the fact that his performance metrics were a manufactured illusion. Your worth to the new parent company is precisely zero, Julian. I stated. I reviewed your branch metrics. You falsified growth projections and pushed liabilities into the next fiscal quarter to artificially inflate your bonuses. You are an operational liability. Liquidating your branch is not a petty grudge. It is sound corporate strategy. The fact that it personally destroys you is simply a highly satisfying fringe benefit. You cannot do this to me, he shouted, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. I will sue the syndicate for wrongful termination. You will do absolutely nothing. I countered smoothly. Your termination packet has already been digitized. It includes a comprehensive breakdown of your falsified reporting. If you threaten this syndicate with a frivolous lawsuit, my legal team will release those findings to every recruiting agency in the sector. You will never work in technology again. A heavy, suffocating silence descended on the line. I could hear him hyperventilating, the catastrophic reality of his situation finally crushing the last remnants of his arrogance. He had no leverage. He had no escape route. He was entirely trapped in the prison he built for himself. Your termination is effective immediately, I concluded, my tone dismissing him completely. Security will be arriving at your regional office in exactly 20 minutes to escort you from the premises. Do not attempt to log into your terminal. Do not attempt to take any corporate assets. Have a pleasant morning, Julian. I pressed the flashing red button on the console, severing the connection and plunging my office back into absolute pristine silence. The first pillar of their fraudulent kingdom had just been demolished. I took a calm, deliberate sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter, dark flavor. Julian was handled. Now it was time to prepare the battlefield for Chloe. The internal communication system on my desk chimed with a soft, urgent tone. It was my executive assistant filtering a call from the ground floor security desk. I tapped the blinking console. Ms. Sterling, my assistant said, her voice conveying a mixture of professional calm and slight alarm. Security is holding a woman in the main lobby. She does not have an appointment, and she is becoming highly agitated. She claims to be a close personal friend of yours. A mess. Chloe. I leaned back in my leather chair, a slow, predatory smile touching my lips. The second pillar was crumbling even faster than I had anticipated. The sheer audacity required to ambush a secure corporate headquarters without an appointment was a testament to her absolute desperation. Do not have security remove her, I instructed smoothly. Tell them to direct her to the private executive receiving lounge on the second floor. I will meet her there. I stood up, smoothing the invisible lines of my tailored suit. I could have easily authorized security to escort her out of the building and onto the rain-slicked pavement. But I wanted to see the devastation up close. I wanted to witness the exact moment her fabricated reality collided with impenetrable corporate architecture. I took the private elevator down to the second floor receiving lounge. The room was a masterpiece of intimidating modern design. Cold marble floors, sharp leather furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district below. It was a space designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. When the glass doors slid open, the contrast between the environment and the woman standing inside was jarring. Chloe looked nothing like the arrogant metallic socialite who had swaggered through the gala ballroom 12 hours ago. Her hair was pulled into a frantic, messy knot. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, likely hiding the physical evidence of a sleepless night. and a designer trench coat that looked completely out of place against the sterile corporate backdrop. As I stepped into the room, she whipped around. The oversized sunglasses came off, revealing bloodshot eyes and mascara smeared across her cheekbones. The moment she saw me, her entire posture collapsed into a performative display of profound agony. "Elena," she gasped, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. She took 2 rapid steps forward, her arms extending as if she intended to pull me into a desperate embrace. I did not move a muscle. I simply raised one hand, palm facing outward, executing a firm nonverbal command to halt. The gesture was so chillingly authoritative that Chloe physically froze in her tracks, her arms dropping awkwardly to her sides. "Take a seat, Chloe," I said, gesturing to the heavy leather chair opposite a glass coffee table. "You have exactly 5 minutes before I summon security." She collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands. The sobbing began immediately. It was a loud, theatrical weeping designed to elicit immediate sympathy. 8 years ago, that sound would have made me drop everything to comfort her. Today, it sounded like a poorly rehearsed audition tape. "I am so sorry," she wailed, peering at me through her fingers to gauge my reaction. "I am so incredibly sorry for everything. Last night, seeing the life you built, it broke me, Elena. It made me realize the horrific magnitude of my mistakes." I sat on the edge of the leather sofa opposite her, resting my hands neatly in my lap. "You are not crying because of your mistakes, Chloe. You are crying because you finally realized who holds the deed to your miserable life." She choked on a sob, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. The facade shifted seamlessly. The weeping subsided, replaced by a desperate, pleading victimhood. And right on cue, she threw the man she had stolen entirely under the bus. "It was Julian," she cried, leaning forward across the glass table. "He manipulated me, Elena. You have to believe me. We were so young back then, and he was so charming. He convinced me that you two were falling apart, that the wedding was a sham. He told me he was going to leave you regardless, and he pressured me into running away with him. I was weak. I was a naive girl caught in his web of lies." The sheer velocity with which she discarded her husband of 8 years was breathtaking. Julian had just spent his morning begging for his job by claiming he did me a favor, and now Chloe was sitting in my corporate lounge claiming she was a victim of his psychological manipulation. They were 2 parasites frantically trying to eat each other to survive. "You were 26 years old?" I stated, my voice devoid of a single ounce of empathy. "You were an adult. You actively helped him drain my accounts. You stole the floral and venue funds. And you spent a month in the Maldives on my credit. Do not insult my intelligence by playing the manipulated victim. You made a calculated financial transaction. It just turned out to be a very bad investment." Chloe recoiled, but the desperation driving her was too strong to let her quit. She swallowed hard, abandoning the fake apology to pivot directly to her actual agenda. "I know about Aurora Holdings," she blurted out, her voice dropping to a frantic, breathless pitch. "I got the late notices from the property management firm. I saw the corporate structure attached to your syndicate. You own the buildings, Elena. You own the retail spaces my art galleries operate in. I hold the master leases." I confirmed coldly, "And you are currently in severe default." She lunged forward, pressing her hands flat against the glass table. "Please, Elena. I am begging you. Those galleries are my entire life. They are everything I have worked for. The art market has been brutal this quarter, and the supply chain issues crippled my margins. If you enforce the eviction, I lose my entire inventory. I go bankrupt. She stared at me with wide, pleading eyes, deploying the ultimate weapon of female solidarity. Woman to woman. Please. We used to be best friends. We shared everything. Do not take my business away from me. Just give me a 6-month rent reduction. Forgive the back rent. Give me a chance to restructure my debts. And I swear I will pay you back every single cent. Just give me a break. I looked at the woman who had stolen my wedding funds, slept with my fiancé, and left me with $50. 000 of devastating debt. She was sitting in a building I owned, begging for financial mercy, while draped in a designer coat she bought on credit. The audacity was not just insulting. It was a spectacular display of narcissistic delusion. She actually believed that her tears could erase a decade of malice. I remained seated, watching her squirm under the weight of my silence. The trap was fully set. She had confessed her financial ruin, admitted her desperation, and thrown her husband to the wolves. She had handed me all the ammunition I needed. Now it was time to let the forensic accounting drop the final fatal bomb on their fraudulent existence. I let the silence stretch out thick and suffocating. I did not blink. I did not shift my posture. I simply sat on the edge of the leather sofa and observed her with a detached curiosity of a scientist studying a microscopic specimen. Chloe's frantic breathing echoed in the cavernous executive lounge, her desperate eyes searching my face for any flicker of emotion. She was desperately waiting for the massive explosion. She was waiting for me to scream, to throw a glass, to hurl insults about her betrayal 8 years ago. She knew how to handle an emotional adversary because emotion made people predictable. Emotion made people weak. But I gave her absolutely nothing. No anger. No validation. No forgiveness. I offered her a terrifying, bottomless void. Your request for a lease modification has been formally noted, I stated, my voice as flat and unyielding as a sheet of ice. My property management division will process the relevant paperwork according to standard corporate protocols. That concludes our business today, Chloe. She stared at me, her jaw dropping slightly, as her brain struggled to comprehend the sheer lack of dramatic payoff. That is it, she stammered, her hands gripping the edge of the glass table. You are just going to note my request, Elena. I am pouring my heart out to you. I am telling you my marriage is a sham and my business is dying. I need to know if you are going to destroy me. I stood up slowly, towering over her seated form. You destroyed yourself the moment you signed commercial leases you could not afford with money you did not have. I replied smoothly. My real estate trust is merely the gravitational force pulling you back down to earth. Security will escort you to the lobby. I turned on my heel and walked out of the lounge, never once looking back. I did not need to see her face to know she was shattering. I could hear her frantic, panicked breathing until the heavy glass doors sealed shut behind me. Returning to my penthouse suite office, I immediately pulled up the internal security network on my terminal. The executive receiving lounge was equipped with high-definition audiovisual recording systems, a standard compliance protocol for a multi-billion-dollar investment syndicate. I downloaded the encrypted file of our entire conversation. I watched the high-definition playback on my screen, studying the exact moment Chloe threw Julian under the bus, weeping about his manipulation and her naive victimhood. I archived the file into a highly secure folder on our private servers. The digital grave they were digging for themselves was getting deeper by the hour. My desk console began to blink with incoming notifications. My assistant had routed a series of voicemails from my secure external line. Julien, having been physically escorted from his regional office by my security team earlier that morning, was currently spiraling into a spectacular meltdown. I pressed play, leaning back in my chair to listen to the symphony of his destruction. The first voicemail was a barrage of aggressive threats, He screamed into the receiver, promising to expose my syndicate to the press, claiming he had insider knowledge of illegal corporate restructuring. It was a pathetic, empty bluff from a man who barely understood his own branch metrics, let alone the macroeconomics of our operations. The second voicemail, left exactly 42 minutes later, shifted into desperate bargaining. He offered to work for minimum wage. He offered to demote himself to a junior analyst position. He begged me to remember the good times we shared in university, attempting to weaponize a nostalgia that I had long since burned to ash. The third and final voicemail, recorded just after noon, was the most damning. His voice was slurred, indicating he had likely retreated to a bar after his termination. "You think you are so smart, Elena," he slurred into the phone, "but you do not know everything. I moved money around at that branch. I moved a lot of money to keep Chloe afloat. If you audit those accounts, you are going to find a mess that will tank your precious acquisition. You need me to fix the ledgers. You need me, Elena." I stopped the playback. A cold, electric thrill shot down my spine. Julian, in his drunken, terrified panic, had just handed me the absolute holy grail of corporate warfare. He had essentially confessed to financial crimes on a recorded line, believing he could use his own embezzlement as leverage against me. He fundamentally misunderstood the power dynamics at play. He thought he possessed a hostage, but he had just handed me a signed confession. I extracted the audio files, securely encrypting them and forwarding them directly to Marcus. My brother-in-law was already leading the forensic accounting team through the acquisition audit, and Julian's drunken voicemail was the exact roadmap we needed to uncover the bodies buried in his branch ledgers. For the rest of the afternoon, I sat in my office and watched the surveillance feeds and listened to the digital evidence pile up. They were doing all the heavy lifting for me. Chloe was leaving panicked voicemails on Julian's phone. Unaware that my legal team had already legally seized his company, issued mobile device during his termination, Julian was leaving drunken confessions on my corporate line. They were trapped in a rapidly shrinking box, suffocating on the toxic fumes of their own desperate decisions. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to engage in petty squabbles or dramatic confrontations. I simply needed to provide them with enough rope to hang themselves, and they were sprinting toward the gallows with breathtaking speed. Every lie they told, every frantic threat they made, and every ounce of blame they shifted onto each other was meticulously cataloged, verified, and secured in our impenetrable legal vault. The sun began to slowly set over the vast financial district, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor of my office. The preliminary skirmishes were over. The psychological warfare had yielded catastrophic results for my enemies. I closed my heavy laptop and stood up slowly, looking out at the sprawling city below. The final pieces of evidence had been successfully gathered, sorted, and weaponized. The ultimate strike was fully prepped. All that remained was the absolute merciless execution of the final phase, a reckoning that would permanently erase them from the corporate world forever. The absolute merciless execution of the final phase commenced the very next morning. The sharp click of the heavy mahogany doors sliding open pulled my attention away from the panoramic view of the financial district. Marcus strode into my office, bringing with him the crisp, electrified air of impending victory. He bypassed the leather visitor chairs entirely and walked straight to my desk. In his right hand, he carried a thick black binder secured with a biometric lock. This was not a standard quarterly earnings report. This was a forensic accounting dossier, the kind of document that dismantled careers, froze offshore bank accounts, and sent arrogant executives to federal prison. Marcus placed the binder on the center of my desk. He did not smile. The warm, jovial brother-in-law who built block cities with my son had vanished completely. replaced by the ruthless chief legal officer who orchestrated corporate executions. He pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. The lock flashed green, and the binder popped open. "I told you the drunken voicemail gave us the roadmap," Marcus said, his deep voice resonating with cold, lethal satisfaction. But even I underestimated the sheer breathtaking stupidity of the man you almost married. Julian did not just move money around to inflate his branch metrics. He actively, repeatedly, and aggressively embezzled corporate funds. I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the top sheet of the summary report. Rows of highlighted transactions detailed a systematic bleeding of the Pacific Northwest branch accounts. The total sum sitting at the bottom of the page was highlighted in bright, undeniable crimson, 200 yuan. Ling, ling, ling. He stole 200. Ling, ling, ling. I stated, reading the number aloud to let the reality of his crimes settle into the quiet air of my office. 205 美元. 450 to be exact. Marcus corrected, pulling out a flowchart that mapped the illicit transactions. He executed this over the course of the last 18 months. As you know, the parent company gave regional vice presidents discretionary budgets for localized marketing and independent software licensing. Julian created 3 fictitious software vendors. He generated fake invoices for cloud analytics and integration consulting, approved the invoices himself using his regional credentials, and wired the corporate funds directly out of the branch operating accounts. I studied the flowchart, tracing the lines of stolen money. Setting up ghost vendors was one of the oldest, most pathetic methods of corporate theft in the book. It was an amateur move, the kind of sloppy financial crime that was guaranteed to be caught during any standard acquisition audit. Julian had only managed to survive this long because Vertex Solutions was too busy hemorrhaging capital to properly audit their regional executives, but the money had to go somewhere. I said, looking up at Marcus. Ghost vendors require shell accounts to receive the wire transfers. Where did he funnel the stolen capital? Marcus finally smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that communicated absolute triumph. That is the masterpiece of this entire operation, Elena. He did not funnel the money into offshore accounts or crypto wallets. He did not buy a yacht or hide it in the Cayman Islands. He wired the embezzled funds directly into the operating accounts of Chloe's failing art galleries. A sharp, breathless laugh escaped my lips. The sheer magnificent irony of the situation was almost too perfect to comprehend. Julian had committed federal wire fraud and corporate embezzlement to steal over $200. Lin, all to desperately float the sinking ship of Chloe's fraudulent curation empire. He stole from his employer to pay her commercial rent. I concluded, visualizing the entire horrific cycle of their debt. Exactly. Marcus confirmed, tapping the final column of the forensic report. And do you remember who holds the master leases for those commercial properties? Your private real estate trust. Julian committed federal felonies to steal money, which he then gave to Chloe, who then unknowingly wired that exact same stolen money directly into your personal investment portfolio to keep her doors open. You have been financially draining them from both sides of the equation. I sat back in my leather chair, letting the absolute magnitude of their self-destruction wash over me. They were not just bad at business. They were criminals. They had escalated from stealing my venue funds to defrauding a major technology firm. Their desperation to maintain the illusion of extreme wealth had driven them to commit serious felonies. This elevates the situation significantly. I noted my mind already calculating the legal ramifications. This is no longer just about liquidating an underperforming branch or terminating a toxic executive. This is a criminal matter. Marcus nodded, his expression turning deadly serious. I have already contacted our liaison at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Corporate embezzlement exceeding $100. 000. Utilizing interstate wire transfers triggers immediate federal jurisdiction. I submitted a preliminary brief to the White-Collar Crime Division this morning. They are highly interested. They have requested the full forensic dossier the moment you officially terminate his employment. We have them completely surrounded. I murmured. Trailing my fingers over the black binder, Chloe will be slapped with an immediate eviction and a lawsuit for breached contract damages. When the authorities seize her gallery assets as part of the embezzlement investigation, she will lose whatever inventory she has left. Julian will be fired, stripped of his unvested stock options, and handed directly over to federal agents. They built a kingdom on a fault line, Marcus said, closing the binder. And you are about to trigger the earthquake. The final acquisition board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 in the morning. The executive team from Vertex Solutions is flying in. Julian has been instructed to attend to present his regional turnaround strategy. He still thinks he is getting a promotion. I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Looking out at the sprawling financial district, the city was a grid of rules, contracts, and consequences. Julian and Chloe had tried to cheat the system, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They thought they could outrun their past, but their past had simply built a better, stronger cage to hold them. Prepare the termination papers, I instructed Marcus. Without turning away from the window, draft the eviction notices for Chloe's galleries. Notify the federal agents that we will have a package ready for them tomorrow morning. Let Julian walk into that boardroom expecting a crown. I am going to hand him a prison sentence instead. The morning sun pierced the executive boardroom, casting light across the mahogany table. The Vertex executives filed in, looking haggard, opening their laptops nervously. Marcus sat to my right, radiating absolute authority. Victor delegated this execution to me, knowing my presence alone would deliver maximum psychological impact. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the heavy mahogany doors swung open. Julian walked in wearing a tailored suit, undoubtedly purchased on another maxed-out credit card. He carried a leather portfolio, swaggering like a man about to conquer the world. Ignoring his executive team, his eyes locked onto the head of the table, expecting Victor Sterling. Instead, he saw me. Julian froze. The arrogant smile fractured. He blinked rapidly, his brain trying to process why the woman he abandoned 8 years ago was sitting in the chairman's seat. I gestured toward the empty chair across from me. "Take your seat, Julian," I instructed. "We have a tight schedule, and your presentation is first." He swallowed hard, stumbling toward the chair. Placing his portfolio on the mahogany surface, the Vertex CEO leaned forward nervously. "Ms. Sterling," the CEO began, "Julian prepared a comprehensive turnaround strategy for the Pacific Northwest branch. We believe his metrics demonstrate significant revenue growth potential." "By all means, Julian," I said smoothly. "Walk us through your metrics. Show the board exactly how you have been driving such remarkable growth." Julian opened his portfolio. His hands trembled so violently the papers rattled. He cleared his throat, launching into a heavily rehearsed presentation, throwing out buzzwords about software synergy and aggressive expansion. He clicked through a slideshow displaying padded revenue forecasts. It was a pathetic, desperate performance. He was sweating profusely, darting frantic looks to my unyielding face, searching for any sign of mercy. He found none. After 10 minutes of listening to his fabricated corporate fiction, I raised a single hand. The room fell silent. Julian stopped mid-sentence, his chest heaving as if he had run a marathon. "Your presentation is highly creative, Julian," I stated, my voice slicing through the heavy air. "But it lacks a certain financial authenticity." "Marcus," Please distribute the updated branch metrics to the Vertex executive team. Marcus stood up smoothly. He handed a thick, black-bound dossier to the Vertex CEO, then slid an identical folder directly across the table until it stopped perfectly in front of Julian. Julian stared down at the black cover, as if it were alive, explosive. "What you are looking at is a forensic accounting audit of the Pacific Northwest branch," I explained. "We do not rely on self-reported slideshows during an acquisition. We rely on hard data." Turn to page 4 to find a detailed breakdown of 3 independent software vendors your branch contracted over the past 18 months. The Vertex CEO flipped open the dossier. The color instantly drained from his face. Julian remained entirely paralyzed. His hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "Those software vendors do not exist," I continued, my voice echoing with lethal precision. "They are ghost entities created by you, Julian. You fabricated invoices, approved those invoices using your regional vice president credentials, and wired funds directly out of your operating accounts. You embezzled exactly $205, $450 from your employer." The boardroom erupted into chaos. The Vertex executives began shouting frantically. Flipping through the evidence, the CEO turned to Julian with a look of unadulterated horror. "You stole from us." The CEO gasped. "You forged these vendor accounts." Julian could not speak. He was hyperventilating, his eyes wide and bloodshot, staring at the damning red ink highlighted in the dossier. He looked up at me, his face twisted in absolute terror. "Elena, please." He choked out, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "You cannot do this. We can fix this. I can explain the transfers. You transferred the stolen corporate funds directly into the commercial operating accounts of your wife's failing art galleries." Marcus interjected, silencing the chaotic room. "Galleries that are currently in massive default on their master leases. You committed federal wire fraud to float a bankrupt business." I reached into a slim folder resting beside me. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the long mahogany table. It glided smoothly, coming to a halt on top of his forensic dossier. "This is your formal termination notice, effective immediately," I stated. "You are stripped of unvested stock options. Your corporate access is permanently revoked, and you are barred from corporate properties." Julian stared at the termination letter, tears welling in his eyes. He was completely broken, stripped of his title, his income, and his freedom. But I was not finished. I pulled out a second document. I slid it across the table, watching it land right next to his termination papers. "And this, Julian, is a personal invoice," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, razor-sharp whisper. "8 years ago, you drained our joint accounts and left me with a $50,000 credit card debt for a wedding you abandoned. I have meticulously tracked that debt with standard market compound interest, plus the legal fees required to freeze the fraudulent tropical charges you and Chloe racked up. Your outstanding balance to me personally is $112. Ling, ling, ling. Julian stared at the invoice, the itemized list of venue charges, floral deposits, and luxury resort fees stared back at him. He finally understood the absolute inescapable magnitude of the trap. He had mocked a girl in a cheap apartment, completely unaware he was insulting the architect of his total annihilation. "You are ruined, Julian," I stated, locking onto his terrified, blank, weeping face. "You are bankrupt, you are unemployable, and your fraudulent kingdom has officially burned to the ground. Security is waiting outside the double doors to escort you out. Gather your portfolio and leave before the federal agents arrive to finalize your arrest." Julian did not move. His body remained entirely paralyzed, pinned to the expensive leather chair by the crushing gravity of his actions. He stared at the itemized invoice and the termination letter, his chest rising and falling in erratic, shallow gasps. The remaining executives from Vertex Solutions physically distanced themselves from him, pushing their chairs back. I simply shifted my gaze to the heavy mahogany doors at the back of the boardroom and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The doors swung open. 2 uniformed security guards stepped inside. But they were immediately flanked by 3 individuals wearing dark suits and federal credentials clipped to their belts. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had arrived precisely on schedule. The lead agent stepped forward, holding a thick file that matched the forensic dossier sitting on the table. "Julien," the agent announced, his voice carrying the uncompromising weight of federal authority. "You are under arrest for corporate embezzlement and interstate wire fraud. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back." He was hauled to his feet, his designer suit rumpling awkwardly as his arms were wrenched behind him. As the agents escorted him toward the door, he looked back at me one last time. There was no arrogance left, no smug superiority. There was only the hollow, terrified realization that he was entirely powerless. I maintained a cold, unyielding eye contact until the heavy doors clicked shut behind him, sealing his fate. It was a truly magnificent sight indeed. The boardroom remained dead silent for a full minute after his departure. I turned my attention back to the Vertex CEO, who looked as though he might be physically ill. "We will resume the restructuring discussion in exactly 15 minutes, I stated smoothly. "Please take this time to review the revised integration protocols Marcus has prepared for you." I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them to sweat. Marcus followed me down the corridor toward my executive suite. As soon as the glass doors of my office sealed behind us, Marcus pulled out his encrypted smartphone. He tapped a single button on the screen and placed the device on my desk. "The property management team is on site at the flagship gallery." Marcus reported, pulling up a live security feed from the commercial property cameras. I watched the high-definition footage stream across the screen. 2 local sheriffs stood on the sidewalk alongside my property managers. Chloe was standing outside the heavy glass doors of her studio. She was screaming, her face contorted in absolute hysteria, aggressively waving her arms at the officers. A heavy steel chain was being wrapped tightly around the brass handles of the gallery entrance. A bright orange eviction notice was slapped directly onto the glass, declaring the immediate seizure of all internal assets to cover the breached contract damages and the frozen embezzled funds. "She is completely locked out," Marcus explained, watching her pound her fists against the locked doors. "Her bank accounts were frozen an hour ago by the federal authorities investigating Julien. Her credit cards are maxed out. Her inventory is officially property of your real estate trust. And her husband is currently sitting in a federal holding cell. They have absolutely nothing left. Not a single dollar. Not a shred of dignity. The empire of lies they built on your stolen money has been completely pulverized." I watched the screen as Chloe sank to the pavement, weeping uncontrollably on the sidewalk while pedestrians walked past her, ignoring her dramatic collapse. It was the exact same feeling of crushing, isolated despair she had left me to experience 8 years ago. The karmic loop had officially closed. I turned off the monitor. There was no need to watch the rest. The spectacle of their suffering was no longer interesting to me. The debt was settled. The ledger was balanced. And my focus immediately returned to the massive corporate empire I was running. I walked back into the boardroom 15 minutes later, projecting the absolute calm of a woman who had just taken out the trash. The Vertex executives were highly compliant. Without Julien's fabricated numbers inflating their valuation, they had no leverage left to negotiate. We finalized the acquisition terms in under an hour, securing a highly lucrative asset for our syndicate at a fraction of the initial projected cost. I dismissed the executives, instructing my integration team to begin the immediate absorption of their viable departments. The hostile takeover was a total and completely unmitigated success. By late afternoon, the adrenaline of the corporate slaughter had faded into a deep, resonant peace. I walked back into my private suite, poured a glass of sparkling water, and opened the heavy glass doors leading out to my private executive balcony. The sprawling financial district stretched out before me, a massive grid of steel and glass gleaming in the fading afternoon sunlight. I walked to the edge of the railing and looked down at the streets below. Victor stepped onto the balcony, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. He rested his chin on my shoulder. His solid, unwavering presence, a perfect anchor. "It is done," he murmured. Looking out at the city, we dominated together. "It is done," I agreed. Leaning back against his chest, I closed my eyes, truly feeling the absolute security of the life I had built. The terrified, heartbroken, 26-year-old girl was a distant memory. I had taken the absolute worst betrayal imaginable and forged it into an impenetrable corporate weapon. Julian and Chloe had originally tried to bury me. I had grown into a massive, untouchable titan, rooting myself deeply into the very foundation of the city they tried to conquer. Success was not just the best revenge. It was the only revenge that truly mattered. I opened my eyes, staring at the empire I commanded, ready to conquer whatever challenge dared to cross my path next.